Hello, I'm Daz, and this week's discussion is about the love for the anti-hero in modern culture. For this, I'll share an article and give you my thoughts. You can find a link to it in the description. The origin of the modern anti-hero. The modern anti-hero owes much of his identity to British spy turned author Ian Fleming. Fleming famously wrote a series of novels about James Bond, a secret agent unbound by law in his fight to protect both Queen and country. Bond's aims were always true, as he fought against those who would harm the innocent for personal gain, power, or vengeance. Yet James Bond is not revered for his successes, but his style. Bond drove the finest automobiles, wore custom-tailored suits, sported a Walther PPK in one hand and a supermodel in the other, finishing off with a shaken martini at the end of the night. Most every man in America has dreamed about that lifestyle, and James Bond has been its quintessential representative since the 1950s. He was probably also a sociopath. A different perspective of James Bond might see an alcoholic womanizer who killed without emotions and shattered every rule handed down to him. Some counts have James Bond sleeping with 52 women over 23 films. A study from Nottingham University Hospital in England claims that Bond consumed 45 alcoholic beverages a week, far more than is necessary to raise red flags from the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Finally, Bond has killed a total of 352 people in 23 films, while dodging 4,662 bullets, a number of which might explain the drive to drink and the need for a warm pair of arms. Despite these potentially crippling emotional flaws, James Bond perseveres, and throughout the years, the wear and tear on Bond's emotions has become a central feature of the story. In the Sean Connery years, James Bond himself was neither shaken nor stirred by the trauma, the drink, the lack of meaningless relationships. The most recent Bond, portrayed by Daniel Craig, was humanized to the point of love, grief, and even tears. It was the first time in Bond's history that he felt almost fragile to a point, a precise instrument of espionage from one perspective, and emotional being from the other. There represents the full spectrum for the anti-hero, a man who is unbound by law and by morals, but ultimately faces the toughest villain of them all, himself. So there's the fall of the hero, the rise of the villain. As the modern hero falls from grace to a place where his sins are central to his appeal, the villain is slowly becoming a source of morality. In the latest Batman film, The Dark Knight Rises, the villain Bane was motivated by political corruption, income inequality, and some cruel, unusual punishment in the prison system. In Star Trek Into Darkness, the villain Khan fought against a corrupt Starfleet admiral who had taken 72 of his crew hostage to force the villain to aid Starfleet's war technology efforts. In the X-Men series, the villain Magneto fights for the rights of his own race of mutated humans who are persecuted by civilians and governments alike. Each of these villains sees himself as a freedom fighter, while our heroes challenge them to their ends. Why do we love the anti-hero? What drives our obsession with heroes that make it good to be bad? There's the human element. There we see our heroes overcome flaws we see in ourselves. That's the drive in each of us to do great things and to believe that if the circumstances were right, we could follow in their footsteps. Finally, there's the lifestyle, the exotic cars and supermodels of James Bond, and the gadgets and the lair of Batman, the command of a starship of Captain Kirk. We love the anti-hero for the desire in ourselves to live free of our moral and emotional constraints, to fight for a cause we believe in, and to do it in an ultimate style. Since our earliest days, most of us have fantasized about getting the bad guy, driving the fastest car, firing the biggest gun, and saving the damsel in distress. It's part of our identity in American culture and beyond, and we owe it to the anti-heroes of modern fiction. The human element. We've all suffered in our lives. We've struggled with loss, sickness, regret, and countless other hardships. These individual emotional battles can be entirely crippling at times. The modern anti-hero has faced these struggles from Dexter Morgan's dark passenger to Bruce Wayne's orphan upbringing, and they've found a way to turn these struggles into drive for good. We can relate to their struggles and hope for the same successes in our own lives. The relation and part of what drives our obsession with the anti-hero. They're flawed just like us, and their successes lead by example. freedom from ethical boundaries. Without his license to kill, James Bond would be lost. There are ethical boundaries in life that prevent normal men and women from becoming heroes. We look up to those who have taken risk and dare to shake things up despite the consequences. While we shouldn't endeavor to hurt others, there are ethical lines that should at times be challenged for the greater good. The most recent example outside of the fictional environment, the work of Edward Snowden, who crossed ethical lines to expose an environment in the work of Edward Snowden, who crossed to expose massive surveillance net following our every digital step. No matter what side of that controversy you adhere to, you have to admit it sounds like the stuff of a great anti-hero fiction. The drive to do great. Beyond our individual struggles, we also feel the pain of others. We see injustices in our lives and those around us, and we each have a drive to do something about it within us. However, we rarely even speak up, let alone act. Our heroes and anti-heroes and some aforementioned villains rise to the occasion to act for those who cannot act on their own. These are the underdog stories, American stories, and they inspire us to follow in their footsteps in a drive to do great. The lifestyle. Nearly every American man has once fantasized about being James Bond. If it's not the supermodel at their side, it's the supercar underfoot. If it's not the endless class and well-timed quip, it's the impeccable style and unshakable confidence, even despite his faults, which mostly overlook. He represents a lot of what men strive to become. The iconography of James Bond is aspirational in its very spirit and his fictional life, and more than just a story to many, it's an underwritten code. From Guy Fawkes to James Bond, Bruce Wayne to Dexter Morgan, the allure of the anti-hero is a strong force in American culture. It represents the worst in us and the best in us at once, a drive to do great despite the deep-seated flaws that serve to derail us. It's not just the freedom from the law and achievement over their own humanity that make them appealing. It's also the lifestyle these anti-heroes lead. The squeaky clean image of the traditional superhero just doesn't cut it anymore. In the United States and throughout the West, it's the flaws, the humanity, and the dare to do great which attracts us so strongly. We love and admire them, and we see so much of them in ourselves. So I just wanted to share that because it's been some time since this article was written, as you can tell from some of the modern examples they gave. But anti-heroes have taken over modern Western culture. I think about to the Joker movie that came out at the end of 2019 and how popular that was. People are really identifying with the villain, I would say, as well, because they have a story of struggle. And a lot of people feel that sometimes with the hero, they are fighting to maintain social norms from a place of privilege. So I would also attribute that to a reason why anti-heroes are so popular in today's culture. I think it also says a lot about people wanting to rebel, wanting to break out of the mold. What are your thoughts on why anti-heroes are so popular in today's culture? And personally, do you find yourself identifying with the villain or the hero of today's movies or stories? As always, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of